still up a game in the match. Magnus has yet to score decisively, and we already see Hikaru switching it up here. Now time for some mainline D4, given that maybe he hears you in his head there, Eric, and wants to get away from this overly solid stuff and try to go for the throat against Magnus.
Well, I think that was a moral victory for Magnus in the end, because that was about a dynamic as an opening as you know he could expect. The two bishops with the bad pawn structure, and it looked like Hikaru was really, he had a good initiative, a lot of momentum, and that knight b1, that exchange sacrifice nullified all of that.
Yeah.
So I think that was well played by Magnus, and Hikaru needs to go for more of these positions. Okay, we're going for something solid here. Okay, knight e4. The other option is c6 and b6.
Yeah, this is theory that both these guys have played before. But so how what's the imbalance here? You have white with this sort of extended pawn structure on the facing
space
toward the king
advantage.
side,
Yeah, you got the space
side.
advantage. You got this good bishop on f4. It usually yields a small edge.
Ooh,
They're going for a sharp line. I think this has been played in some
that's
tournaments.
a super aggressive move, everybody. Given that white also has options to try to just maintain this pawn chain and keep the position more closed.
So
C6 is
yeah, white has the space. Black's gonna play knight e4, then f5, and they're gonna start playing some stonewall type of moves, like maybe g5, f5, g5. One of the questions is, how do you deal with his bishop on c8? Maybe that's going to be a5 and bishop a6, but otherwise expect that.
He goes for that right now.
And you know why he did that? Because maybe white was threatening to play
b4,
b4, b5, and,
right,
or something like that.
Yeah, this is the line, everybody, that Eric is thinking. If Hikaru gets this sort of clamp, this bishop might never get into the game. So interesting move there by Magnus to play a5 to ensure that doesn't happen. Now he plays f6. He's choosing to protect the e5 square against these pieces, rather than be super aggressive at this point with f5 and g5.
Right. And he can play f5 later. He's going for the flexible move order. It's going to be a slower position, and the reason is because of this pawn on c6. It's like there's no open files right now.
Kind of a thorn, right? It keeps black from getting actively developed, but also a potential weakness later on in the game, everybody. You got to keep your eye on overextended pawns. If that guy eventually falls, Magnus might have winning chances in the endgame.
So the knight on e4 is very annoying because white would like to take and maybe play knight d2, but this bishop a6 move is always going to haunt you. So you have to time it properly.
Yeah, if something like takes here, everybody, this is the line that Eric is highlighting. The bishop comes to a6, and lots of light square problems here, and maybe black will prevent white from getting castled. So that's why. But look for Hikaru to maybe do that, because one chance, if let's say he moves the rook off of the f1 square, so there's no skewer of the queen and rook, you might look to take and play knight d2 just because there is this potential that the e4 pawn becomes a target. But it's also very risky because black can play f5 and f4, and the attack might get really, really dangerous. Okay, so we're not going to see that. Magnus is going to gobble up the bishop pair and take away Hikaru's option to ever trade here.
He might be playing g4 next and f5.
Ooh. I'm getting excited over here. G4, f5, and let's go for a
f
mating
takes.
then on the
Okay,
H-file.
here we go.
Oh, wow. That's surprising to all of us, everybody, because it's usually very anti-positional to take away from the center and leave yourself with weaknesses. That's why you hear the oohs and ahs from me and Eric. But Hikaru's doing that because he wants the f-file and wants something a little more dynamic. This is going to be tricky.
I mean, it's simply, if Hikaru can't open up the position now, he's going to gradually get a worse position because black has the two bishops, a better pawn structure, and a long-term plan of playing f5, h5, h4. This good bishop on d6 is going to be a real thorn long-term. Hikaru, I don't see where the break is, but if there's no break here, Danny, queen g5, h5, h4. This is two bishops slowly opening up. The one thing is this bishop on c8 is the problem. Otherwise, I'd say black's piece. Much better, but that's the one problem. But what does white do in the meantime?
So
knight b1, knight
c2. Let me throw something at you then, considering that idea about how bad that bishop is. What if white puts a rook on f4 with some idea that if it's ever traded, right, you've got a position where now this bishop is so bad, you might have some compensation for the exchange.
I like it. The only problem is, okay, so now if you play rook f4, that's I like that. Black will probably still continue with h5,
yeah, just ignore
h4.
it basically. Queen g5, h5, h4.
But I might be misevaluating this bishop on how do you get this bishop out? Do you play e5? Because then f5 is a serious weakness. But
Right.
like I might even see knight b1, knight c3 at some point. I wouldn't even be surprised if that actually gets played. Knight b1, knight c3, maybe knight b5. Get rid of this bishop on d6. We saw knight b1 in the last game. I mean, where is this knight
quite
going?
the journey for the pony to take there, but I
I see no other journey.
Yeah.
Can't go to f3. F1 does nothing. Bishop on d3 is great because it keeps the bishop on c8 at bay and the rook on a8. Okay, he's going for bishop there. And is it maybe that Hikaru wants to play knight b1, knight c3, and bring the knight to f4? Same idea that you had before.
F4,
but
yeah, interesting. Yeah, Magnus isn't going to sit around and wait for that to happen. He's going to get that bishop on c8 in the game finally. But e5 had weaknesses, right? E5 weakened f5, everybody. It weakened d5. So this is not so simple.
What's weaker, Black's kingside expansion or this e3 pawn?
Yeah,
I'm going to generally say actually this e3 pawn, especially Black's going to maybe play bishop c3. Now he's got the nice setup. His rook is out of the position. You know, it's developed instead of being on a8. And he's got this long-term pressure on e3. And I do expect to see king g7, maybe h5, h4. But yeah, his bishop b5 maneuver, I do not like for Hikaru. I don't see what this bishop on b5 does. It looks completely misplaced.
Maneuver there by Magnus, right? To play e5, get the bishop developed, and then put it back on c8 where it's out of the way for the rook, right? We can all learn from that sort of...
Okay, maybe some tricks here. We'll see.
Yeah, there's a queen on the diagonal with the king. And
to me, it looks like this is going to be a comfortable push for Magnus. He's going to stabilize. Maybe he's going to put a rook on e5, where he's getting ready to double on the e file, put pressure on e3, but also it defends, overprotects f5, jams diagonal. You're safe on the dark squares. There's a big imbalance here in that Black has this amazing bishop on c5, and that's permanently there. I mean,
and this rook on e4 prevents things like the rook.
This is bad. This is really bad.
You might even see rook d4 and then bishop d4. So this is getting harder for white, and you start to get in that blunder territory, right? Where now all of a sudden you're calculating if white makes a dangerous move, you might just lose in one move on d4 somehow.
F4 is tempting, but I don't see you can just take with a g pawn. So maybe
h5 and h4, right? Just launch the h pawn.
So h5, bishop d3. I'm looking at there's rook takes d4. So bishop d3 is not a move right now because of rook takes d4.
Yeah, that's
so
huge.
Magnus can just park that rook there and continue to improve his position. So I think
h5, h4 makes a lot of sense on that.
Otherwise queen e5 might be the other move to just creep in slowly, and then h5, h4. But similar ideas. This bishop on b5, Danny. I mean, he has to just put it there because maybe c6 is weak, but it can't be the solution.
Yeah, and it's like a big pawn here, right? It's just staring at the back of c6 and really not effective at all. The bishop on c8 is in many ways actually more effective because there's the potential it might get loose.
Yeah. So you have some issues here because you can't play rook e1 for the same reason, rook takes d4. These dark square tactics are just... And if you ever move the knight out of the way, then f4 becomes a real possibility because the e3 pawn will be pinned.
Well, one idea of moving the knight out of the way, you'd love to get it to f4. The problem is that, you're saying the tactics on e3 are just devastating. So how do you get around that? Is there a move like rook d3 for Hikaru to consider, overprotect the pawn, and try to threaten knight e2, knight f4?
If you play knight e2, I still play f4.
Taking advantage of the pin.
In some of the lines.
That's dirty.
but he did do rook d3, and
I think he has
rook f4 is an
to
exchange sacrifice. Yeah. Knight e2, knight f4. No, I think you found the only line.
Yeah, but there may be some crazy tactics here on e3, for example, because there's a mating net. If rook takes e3, the king takes it. Queen e5 check, followed by maybe that.
The king goes back to f2. If the king went to d2, then there's bishop b4. But the king can go to f2. That almost works. Rook takes e3 almost works, but king f2 is the issue.
Okay, but and from Magnus's perspective. And that's instructive for everybody. He doesn't need to rush it. You can play h5 and h4.
But isn't knight e2 concerning, Danny? Because then d5 in some lines is hanging, or knight f4 check, and then knight takes d5.
Yeah. Okay,
so knight e2 is the
actually
d5.
An idea then. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So
this is a good game. I mean, both players now spending a lot of time trying to solve this one. I think as Black, you want to keep the queens and all the pieces on the board. So you can allow knight e2, but you don't want the queen straight off. It makes the defensive task much easier. f4, wow. So g takes f4 is going to be played quickly, I'm expecting.
Yeah.
And now what does Magnus have in mind?
He's
Queen
got
h4,
he's got
king
an
g1.
all-in attitude here. He plays queen h4 check. He's hoping to launch an attack.
So if king g1, g3,
Well, okay, so if king g1, g3,
g3.
though, Magnus...
He's going for g3 and then some sort
Look
of
out
rook.
for moves like even
Rook
knight
takes
f3 in
e3.
some positions, though, because if the knight retreats, Eric, the queen on c3 is opened up to h8, and
Yes.
now Magnus's king is in danger.
Knight f3. Knight f3
I
is a
love
good
knight
move
f3.
because
Yeah,
if you play h3, rook takes e3,
And he finds
would
it.
have been
Knight f3
Wait,
is
wait.
a huge move there,
queen
everybody.
takes. So if queen takes f4, there's queen takes c5.
Queen takes
Queen
c5,
takes
is
c5.
winning on the spot.
What are we missing? Queen takes c5
I don't
here.
think we're missing anything. I think Magnus blundered. And Hikaru, that's Hikaru look number 6, everybody. That means he knows he's winning. Take a note
King
of that. That's
h1?
clippable right there.
King h1 here.
Yeah, he's
This
just
is
winning.
the sort of complicated game that we're looking for. Okay, d4.
That's sort of off glance, Eric, right there by
Yes.
Hikaru. That means he knows he was winning. Right there. You saw it. Sorry, you're the chess expert.
I'm a bit.
I'm
I'm actually a bit
facial expression expert.
I'm actually a bit traumatized when it comes to
by that
Hikaru.
look,
So I'm not
because he's
I'm not
giving you that
looking
look
at
too
him.
many times.
Yeah, I don't want to suffer from Stockholm syndrome. Or I don't know. I just lost so many times, and I've seen that look before.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
commentating now. Bishop d3 is the threat. Bishop d3. But this is a clean. This is just a
it
knight
should
h4
be a
or
clean
knight
win,
e5.
but
Yeah.
until Hikaru is able to gobble up something about the d pawn or at least the h pawn, get the king out of a potential mating that he does. Now this should be a pretty easy win for Nakamura. And Magnus throws in the towel.
No, this you can't.